thank you. It is such an honor to be here. I bring you greetings from 25 million of my closest friends in the U.S. who are all scouting for a 3-year holiday properties here. If you have one, let us know. For some obvious reasons. I like these gatherings of experts because it's a chance for all of us to push our puzzle pieces to the middle and see what it looks like. So I don't in any way assume that I have all the answers. I certainly have made most of the mistakes. I can repeat those mistakes flawlessly now. I've learned them so well in about probably 120 cities over the years. Infill development has been a real subject in the U.S. as well, and so I'd love to talk to you about that. There's some things that were developed that you can download for free, and it might be very helpful. So I come from Nashville, Tennessee, where most of my friends are musicians, and they all know one lyric, which is, "Do you want chips with that?" That's the lyric they all know. So I have a son who has been trying to be a rock star, and probably last year we got the 1,000-year flood in Nashville, 2 back-to-back 100s, which I guess equaled 1,000, and there are about maybe 13,000 houses underwater. The first 3 roads in downtown Nashville up from the river were underwater. The stadium, which they stole stormwater money to build some of the stadium, was flooded to row 32, which seemed ironically good that it was a detention system, at least for a short period of time. And I got lots of calls from panicked friends who said, "You're stormwater, you must know." And finally, my young musician son said, "Dad, your job's finally relevant." And I thought, you know, buddy, it was relevant to you during college, just let me tell you. But for us, our jobs are becoming more and more relevant as stormwater becomes less about underground pipes and more about visible, enjoyable infrastructure. No one has ever hiked and picnicked along a wastewater collection system. They just never do. But all the time, hiking along a well-designed water-sensitive urban design system, those are some of the most attractive locations in the U.S., economically attractive, in fact. So having said all that, I'm going to see if this will work. Yeah, so we all know what the hydrologic cycle is: rainfall, runoff, cloud formation, and so on. But there's another cycle that I ran into many years ago that you probably have run into as well, called the hydroillogical cycle. And it works like this: flooding, panic, planning, procrastination. Yeah, see, some of you are not yet. You don't, yeah. How many of you have been around that cycle in your community or in your experience? Yeah, so, you know, and those of you who haven't raised your hands are way too young. Just wait. Because there is no easy way out of that. And it's not just flooding. There's a whole list, and I love your drivers thing, the evolution of drivers. I wrote about stormwater paradigms probably 20 years ago, and all these professors teach it now and make their kids learn it. But those drivers, I've encountered all of those at some point in time, and you probably have as well. Why are we doing stormwater? Well, because of water quality ecology. In some places in the U.S., ecology is driving the stormwater program, protecting some endangered species. There's another driver that, so I have 4 millennial children, and this is their coffee. Okay, now I admit I had Nescafe this morning at 4:30, okay, nothing was open, but I did have my long black a little later. Organic, fair trade, locally roasted, and beautifully crafted. So I have 3 of my children roast their own beans. I mean, they will not get coffee from no store is good enough. But when they look at water-sensitive urban design, it fits their mode of living. It fits what they love. Especially in the larger cities that would be here, they will they will want to live in walkable green neighborhoods. That is just the coolest thing in Nashville. The property prices have skyrocketed in places where green infrastructure and green streets have been growing. And that's been proven out. So I was testifying before US EPA on behalf of the home builders. Go figure. I told them, you don't want me to testify because you're not going to like what I say. And this was the headline in USA Today newspaper the day. So I brought it with me and waved it in front of the group. I said, look, a new look of urban housing is walkable neighborhoods with green features. And two kinds of people definitely agree on that: millennials, my kids, and me, retiring baby boomers. Both of them want to live in those kind of neighborhoods and will pay a significant premium to do so. If you're in an apartment in an upper story in the US and you look out on a green roof, 30% upcharge in your rent just to be able to see a green roof and not our roof, right? And so when we look at all of those drivers and we say, what is the way out of this cycle? We're way smart enough to build things and design things, but the only way out of that procrastination cycle is funding. That becomes the problem. And so many years ago, I was a researcher with the Corps of Engineers, and so I was real geeky, and I taught hydrology at Vanderbilt, and I just loved geeky stuff. And then I realized that we needed planning to build these geeky things, so I became a planner. And then I realized we needed money to build the things that we planned, and so I don't do any geeky stuff anymore. I just do finance stuff, and it's fun, but not that fun, but it's okay. So of course it's not quite that easy just to go get money, and that's why we're here. So I want to give us a little bit of a framework. And so in the 1980s, we began, a number of us would meet at, for beer outside of a conference and go, what are you seeing? What are you seeing? Well, what can we try? And so we kind of came up with three key ideas that I want to help to frame where things have gone. So the key idea is this: stormwater, it's time to grow up. Water is kind of like that Harvard-educated medical doctor who's doing research at the Mayo Clinic, and sewer is kind of like the PhD who won several prizes in literature and is writing great novels. And stormwater is like the kid who flunked out of basket weaving, went off to Nepal, smokes questionable vegetation, and is now living in your basement. That's kind of stormwater. And so the main thing for us was that stormwater needs to look, act, and smell like its older sibs, water and wastewater. It's the third leg on the water resources stool. And unless we begin to think of it that way and to make it operate that way, it will never be successful, and it will never take its place and where it should be. And what's interesting is that today in Adelaide, integrated planning of stormwater and wastewater is in the news. It's on the website. It's we need to integrate these things. As water scarcity becomes important, then the transition between wastewater, gray water, stormwater, it's just water. Water is water is water, and we should have water agencies that manage water from the sky to the ground to the ocean in a coordinated fashion, and we're heading that way in different ways. So stormwater is time for you to grow up too. Now, when we think about that, every parcel has three water systems. It has a water supply system, it has a wastewater system, and it has a stormwater system. Now, it knows it has two of those. It might not know it has the third one. You might not know it has a third one, okay? We might not know where that third one is, who owns it, what it's sized for, what condition it's in, and who pays for it. But nature knows, and nature uses that system all the time. That homeowner will say, that's mine, and if it breaks, I'll complain, but I'll fix it. But that's not mine. That's a public system. And I would expect the public to own and operate that system in a way that serves all property owners in an equitable and safe manner. So when you look at the stormwater system, in the 80s, we began to say, how much of that figure up on the right, how much of that do we manage? If there were a statue to the stormwater manager in most US cities in the 80s, it would look like this, right? I don't do that. I don't go off the right of way. I don't do roads. Public Works does roads. The state does that. I don't do, you know, it was a whole question of I don't. And the I don'ts were necessary because there's no budget to say I do. And so we just kept pushing it off. We had no idea. I had one city engineer, I said, well, you should look in your pipes and see how bad they are. And he said, hell no. He said, if I do that, then I'm responsible. Then I know how bad they are. I don't want to know. And I thought, you know, that's like asking your kids where they were Friday night. You know, you just don't ask if you don't want to know. And so with that, we said, okay, we need 3 major policies to put this together. Extent of service is where I go. What is my public system? Type of service, what do I do when I get there? And level of service, how well do I do it? And if we merge those 3, we can control both liability and finance even while we're providing a reasonable system. So Charlotte, back in 1979, said, from the time that a public drop of water enters the system, i.e. road water runoff, it's a public system. End of discussion. And we all looked at each other. I was a young engineer, way young back then. That was my first stormwater utility. And we said, gulp. Okay, let's try it. And they have managed it that way now since '79. But they control what they do. So in people's backyards, their only service is emergency response, right? So it's not like everything has to have asset management type maintenance and things. And so and they've grown their system over time. They didn't just adopt it, but they mapped their system. They got easements. And so they did it in an orderly way. So I'm not just saying, poof, you have a stormwater system, but I'm saying the end game is to have a public stormwater system that we own and operate. As you start thinking about water-sensitive urban design, you start to realize that the right-of-way is not sacrosanct for road drainage. The right-of-way becomes a shared urban walking corridor, drainage corridor, gardening corridor, and the idea that there's public-private right-of-way and the two don't meet is being obliterated in most places in the U.S. that have begun to adopt water-sensitive urban design, walkable neighborhoods, new urbanism, infill development, because you can't have that corridor that's untouched as public and private flow together. And so, for example, in Atlanta, we developed a way for private property to use a public right-of-way for green infrastructure in a way that's shared and orderly, and liabilities are sorted out, and so on. So number 1, stormwater is a system like water and wastewater. That's idea number 1. When we don't have that idea, then we'll be piecemeal forever because we're thinking piecemeal. Now there's a second one, and Steve really has said all of this. I could have skipped through my first 20 slides, but maybe it bears repeating. So if it's a system, then it should be operated in a comprehensive business-like manner, just like older siblings, right? So what does that look like? Well, so we asked ourselves, how do we create a business plan for stormwater? And we use something called the 5 whys technique. So somebody says, I've got a flooding problem, and you ask, if you're older than 10, then asking 5 why questions won't upset people. It will actually bring truth. And so you say, okay, why is there flooding? There's always a combination of 5 reasons why there's flooding immediately. But if you ask why those 5 exist, you get down to more in-depth reasons. And as you keep working down, you go from a physical set of reasons to an institutional set of reasons. And what the business plan says is that if you don't solve the institutional problems at the bottom, you'll continually create the physical problems at the top. And we cannot keep putting out fires here when we're making things flammable down here. We have to work top to bottom, right? And so when you look at how we come up with a business plan, and you take any one of your drivers and ask those 5 why questions, and you eventually come up with a plan that is both an operational plan and a finance plan, a policy plan, and a staffing plan. So it's got dollars, so it's not just kind of a business plan, it's a business and operational plan. And so you can see where, what I call safe funding, and we'll get to that in a minute, but you can see where it fits. So when I talk about funding, I want you to understand that I'm talking about funding in the context of a framework. Okay? We're not just going to go out and get money. The very worst thing that you can do is, how would I say this? So it's like you're drinking from a, I have older sisters, so I have lots of horror stories about sisters, but one of them is I'm drinking from a water hose and a sister is back where the faucet is, and you know what she did, right? Turn on, and well, that's what happens when you suddenly set up a stormwater utility and you've been drinking from a dribble of funding, and now you've got 4 times the funding but no capacity to spend it efficiently. That is worse than having no funding. I was called into Columbus, Ohio, and they said, City Council is going to pull the plug on our utility unless we fix our ability to spend the money. We've been building up resources in our bank account, and we're all about to get fired. And you think, I'd love to have that problem. No, you wouldn't love to have that problem. That is expose in the newspaper, area. Okay, so the business of stormwater, when you look at kind of the pie chart of stormwater costs, at least in the US, the big 3 are always capital, operations, environmental compliance, and then there's a whole bunch of other ones. If you're a big development community, then it's development-related kinds of things. And those big 3, if you look at how we pay for those big 3, you kind of go, okay, I see where the problem is. What do stormwater programs cost in the US? Now, I didn't convert this to Australian dollars per hectare because I actually honestly wasn't sure how to factor in I think your systems are 25% more expensive or 30 or 40% more expensive. And so if you just add half again to the numbers on the left, so if you want a moderate stormwater program, let's say you're at $200 to $300 per acre per year. And I know you guys use acres and hectares, right? Okay. So $200 to $300 per acre per year. That's based on pretty good data. Now there'll be extreme examples where somebody has a rapidly accelerating capital program or some big project or whatever, but that's generally what they cost. Okay, so kind of keep that in mind. And so then the last, because we're going to come back to that. So then the last thing is, to be effective, you need diverse funding strategies centered around revenue. So the point of setting up one of these funding mechanisms is that you look at all viable funding and financing approaches. And I think everybody knows, but let me just say it because it bears repeating. Financing doesn't generate new revenue. It helps you efficiently spend revenue. It helps you get money that you have to pay back. Financing doesn't put new money into your coffers. It just lets you borrow money perhaps efficiently so you can run a more efficient operation and so on. And all forms of financing, whether it's public, private, green bonds, you have to pay that back. And you're not going to do any of those things if you don't have a stream, a stable, reliable to the financial people stream of revenue to pay it back. It's all, green bonds are great, but if you can't pay them back, you ain't ever going to do a green bond, okay? And so, so we need to then have effective things. So I always put how we resource a stormwater program into 4 buckets. I've never found anything that doesn't fit or straddle these buckets. So efficiency is technological efficiency, operational efficiency, financial efficiency. You can probably save 20 or 30% by getting really efficient on how you do things. That's a typical number. I mean, and so what that does is you have the same program, but it costs you less. So for example, we're using drones now for all of our linear inspections. We're using cheap airborne LiDAR for quick mapping of sites and drones for LiDAR mapping of sites rather than surveyors. I mean, you just on and on and on. Financial efficiencies, operational efficiencies. We have run a capital program for Nashville, Tennessee for 20 years, and we can go from complaint to construction in 6 hours if we need to, with just some very strict operational efficiencies, contracting efficiencies, and so on. to the point where we even answer the phone now for Nashville, City of Nashville, can I help you? Resources are free help from other people. So for example, you might have corporate sponsorship, nonprofit. The Stormwater Authority would be a resource to you. It helps you. It may also be money, which I'll get to in just a second. So you have the same program. Let's say you have this expanded program, but other people do parts of it for you. Okay? So it's free stuff. And it's free stuff. You can get all kinds of free stuff from the interweb rather than getting it all yourself, right? So don't invent anything. Everything's been invented. Don't go out and spend $200,000 for a new design manual. Change the cover on your neighbors and go for it, okay? So, and I'm a consultant, I'm saying that, which is crazy. Then there's money. Money is not revenue. And we get confused about that a lot. So some of the things that Steve put up there, all the development charges, all those are money, right? If 1% of your community develops a year, 1% of your infrastructure is going to get helped by that development. The other 99% will not. So what happens with money is that something has to trigger you getting the money. So a grant would be money. Now, most Nashville musicians live on money, right? I get a gig, I can eat. I don't get a gig, I'm going to go be a waiter, okay? Because I need revenue to live. In the same way, we can't live on money. Money is great. Money can, in some years, you get a huge chunk of money from the Stormwater Authority. You know, they match a capital. I know right here in Charles Sturt, you know, they've gotten significant funds for a new street project. Okay, so some help some of the time. And then there's revenue. And so revenue is like your paycheck. It's regular, it's predictable. You can use revenue to help pay bonding, to take down the costs of bonding. You can use revenue bonds. You can do a 10-year capital project. You can attract other matching grants with revenue. Revenue gives you the ability to promise Minerva Schmedlap that you are going to fix her drainage problem on October 23rd, 3 years from now, and that she's project number, you know, 75 in your project list, and you can count on it. Okay? Money doesn't allow you to do that, but revenue does. So, so here was, oh, this is some efficiencies. This is interesting. So this was, I popped this in last night, but this is 3 kinds of efficiencies that an economics company was talking about how much they reduce their cost just by using efficient ways of doing things, okay? And so there's crazy good ideas out there on efficiency, and we should always say, is this an archaic way of doing it, even if I invented it last year? We should always be thinking innovatively. And then wait for somebody else to do it, screw it up, figure out what they did wrong, and then move on with yours, right? So here's some resources and stuff. So free stuff from the internet neighbors, free volunteer programs. If you've ever run a volunteer program, you know they're not free. Okay, we once ran a Boy Scout inlet grate stenciling program, and the attorney saw what we were doing and said, you need 2 street crew flaggers for each Boy Scout who's out stenciling. And we're like, okay, would the moms work? Could we let the moms be the flag? You know, no. Non-monetary assistance. So there's all kinds of grants, other kinds of assistance. Here's one that's been getting traction in the US. So corporations love to be seen as environmental, and you can get them to not put their name on a Australian rules football stadium, but on a detention pond, on a green park. This park brought to you by Boeing. And the park is really a disguised water-sensitive urban design site with lots of amenities and a playground and stuff around it that floods when it floods, but it's not now. And the thing is paid for and maintained by their staff. Same sort of thing. I don't know if Starbucks actually bought into this one, but, and I don't know if they actually use that water, but still, it caught my eye when I was in Seattle the other day. My kids go, Dad, don't take pictures of stuff in the street. Oh, Dad. You want to put your kid through college? that there are probably some limits. But so there's lots of things. So money, I've already talked to you about money. There's, I know of at least, I don't know, 60 kinds of fees and grants and loans and ways to get money, okay, something like that. And I'm watching high tea be set up, and I know I'm standing between you and high tea, so I'm going to talk like a Yankee on drugs as I see they put out the rest of the food. So let's talk about revenue. In the US, there are legally 4 ways of getting revenue, 4 major categories. Taxes, we know what taxes are. Exactions are something that if someone wants to use your public property or public services, it's going to cost them. Usually exactions are money, just one time. But so, for example, we have set up a deal where people will pay a franchise fee to use the public right-of-way, a cable company. We've even set it up, because we couldn't get revenue, we've even set it up so that the wastewater authority pays a franchise fee to the city to use the right-of-way for the wastewater system. You bet we were desperate. We were trying to figure out a way to pay for stormwater, and we figured we could pay for it with wastewater by virtue of a franchise fee, right? As you begin to tie wastewater and stormwater more and more together, the wastewater fee can become a funding source for your stormwater program. And it's already there. It's easy. When we set up City of Philadelphia's, we just said there's a wet weather component to the wastewater fee and a user component to the wastewater fee. And the wet weather component looked and smelled a whole lot like a stormwater user fee. In fact, it was a stormwater user fee, but it was tied to the wastewater fee. So there are ways of thinking a little differently about that. Assessments, so it's a tax, it's a asset-based, direct and special benefit-based tax, where if you build something in one neighborhood, you can assess all the properties in that neighborhood, and I don't know if you can do that legally here, but you can assess them based on the benefit they receive. And so we have set up flood control systems that only benefit certain neighborhoods, and they pay a special assessment fee which covers the maintenance and the amortization of the cost forever. So New York State has set up hundreds of these. Colorado has set up hundreds of these. And then there's service charge. A service charge is not a tax. It's not a rain tax, no matter what the newspapers say when you set one of these things up. And it's tied to a program objective. The fee must be based on the cost of service. And there are other certain rules. It's been tested in court, stormwater user fees 10 times. And so there's a whole set of don't do this or you're going to lose in court, or do this and you'll win in court. So when we look at revenue, here's just some examples of those, and I already mentioned some of them. Water and wastewater cross ties. Solid waste cross ties. A lot of your stormwater program has to do with trash, has to do with household hazardous waste, blah, blah. And so we've set it up where part of your solid waste fee goes to stormwater, right? Street sweeping goes to stormwater. And so look, when you're desperate, you get money any way you can. California, where stormwater user fees are illegal till last week, has done some of these crazy things forever. Do you have special local option sales taxes here? Do you even have sales taxes here? I don't know. Most cities in the US can do a 1 or 2% sales tax that is dedicated to stormwater or dedicated to something else. This works really well in tourist areas, because guess who's paying for your stormwater? You always want outside people to pay if you can. So sales tax. City of Aspen did a surcharge on their lift ticket for skiing for stormwater, because they make snow, that snow runs off. It's a weird kind of runoff. It's not normal. And so we set it up so they pay a lift ticket surcharge. I mean, imagination, you know, is the mother of funding, right? So think about different ways. TIF districts, I think you maybe have those, but you say, okay, we're going to take a downtrodden neighborhood, rebuild it infrastructure-wise to attract good development, and the tax increment that comes, the increase in property tax, is going to go back to fund the infrastructure, including stormwater. And so we've done it that way. So there's lots of examples of that. This is probably, and you've got it now, but that's probably the best source. There's 6 or 7 other ones. The URL is like I don't know, 100 letters long. But you can just look up Guidebook for Financial Tools, and that is for water, wastewater, and stormwater, and it's got 200 tools in it. I mean, it's got more than, with web links, and I mean, it's awesome. The Environmental Finance Center has really done a good job. This is probably the 6th edition of it. And so it's a great, it's the best source in the US for looking at crazy ideas that you go, that's not so crazy where I live, right? Okay, so at the end of the day then, we're setting up a building block system with all of these kinds of things, and that's great. But when you look at, and this is Andy's stormwater program from hell, so this is kind of everything, and this is probably 8 or 10 years old. There's a lot of other things now, but when you look at all of those things that you do, how many of those things can you not cover with efficiencies, resources, and money? And if you made those back into that pie chart, you'd find that the biggest pie pieces are the ones you can't cover with efficiencies, resources, and money. You need revenue to cover those. This is this is from the Stormwater Management Stormwater Association out of your latest operating, I forget which document it's from. Sorry, I should have had the reference there. But I like this. As part of developing supports for future storm management, the authority has identified likely deficiencies in resourcing stormwater. And all of us know, I mean, this is a great organization. I wish we had those in the US because you need somebody to help you out and cost share, and we have to rely on a patchwork, not an authority like you have. But again, there's the problem. Okay, so why is a stormwater utility then what I would guess is the best answer to the revenue piece of your program? First of all, we have set up utilities that are primarily seen as organizational entities. Call the utility. Call 336-RAIN, 704-336-RAIN, or if you're calling from here, 00111, as I learned the hard way. And so it can be an organizational entity. It must be a program concept. If somebody pays a bill for something they thought they were getting for free, you'd better offer better service, right? We just, yesterday, I got word that a utility we helped set up in Colorado Springs came online, 100% vote for it. And one of the things the mayor said is with the money we freed up that this utility is now covering, we're hiring 20 new police officers and 2 fire crews. So one of the huge advantages of this is that there's a peace dividend back to the local government for what they had been spending stormwater on, right? So this is a way to get what you want over here by setting something up over here. You never say that in writing, right? Notice it's not anywhere on there, but it is. Okay, 4 reasons why these are the arguments you make. Stable. That is your stormwater money-based program. Up, down, up, down, up, down. You have to operate in the troughs. You can't operate above the troughs because you don't know when the money's coming. A stormwater use fee system is stable. Not only is it stable, but every time a new property develops, your revenue goes up. And so you grow with growth. You don't lag behind with growth, okay? A dedicated tax would work the same. The problem with dedicated taxes is there's a new administration every few years and it stops being a dedicated tax. I've never seen one last more than 3 administrations. They just, stormwater just doesn't scream. Today, every stormwater system in Adelaide's working great, right? Every single one of them is flawless. Or so we think, right? Because stormwater is this weird provisional system. You don't know how bad it is till it rains hard. Then it's too late. The typical, okay, I'm going to take a poll. The typical monthly fee around the US, this is a little dated, so let's say it's about $5. And this is for all cities. For larger cities, the average is in the $7 to $8 a month range, US dollars, okay? Okay, so let's do this. Think about your community and ask yourself, how much money would be kind of the upper end that I think homeowners would be willing to pay if they knew it was dedicated to clean water, stormwater, water-sensitive urban design, cleaning up the bay, keeping streets from flooding. It was dedicated to that. Couldn't be used on anything else. Dedicated to that. So get a number in your head. Okay. Now, if you're from a city that you don't think they want to pay anything, pretend you're from a different city just for this thing. Okay. Just move. Okay. Everybody got a number in their head? Okay. No fear of being influenced. Okay. $2. $2 is the top. Not even a good cup of coffee. Okay. $4. $4 is about, okay. 6. People are wanting to raise their hand, but they don't want to be first. Go ahead, just raise your hand. Okay. Yeah, just throw them up. $6 per month per household. Yeah? Okay, so we got a few. 8. Couple more. 10. Okay, we got about 80% of the crowd. 12 or higher. Yeah? Yeah, okay. That's good. So the average in here is between 8 and 10, somewhere in there. Now, the interesting thing is that for every $1 per month, you generate somewhere in the $25 to $40 per acre per year range. Remember what stormwater programs cost? So a $5 fee will pay for a stormwater program, a moderate program, without a huge capital piece, everything. It will cover everything. Okay? That's the beauty of them, is that you stay below your identified scream level, but you still generate enough revenue to pay for a complete stormwater program. Now, obviously, somebody's paying more than $5 or $8 a month, and that's called non-residential properties, right? So let's talk a little bit more about that. I have some rough revenue estimates here. So there's Adelaide, whole urban area at a $5 fee, 84 million. $8 fee, 134 million. So you can flat generate some bucks. And you can all have copies of this. I think, go ahead and make a PDF, and yeah, so you can all have copies. Okay? So you can flat generate some money. I mean, it's, and we were kind of shocked when we set the first few up and saw the money coming in. And then we started warning people, look, you're going to get some money. We need to plan how to spend it. The day the first bill goes out, you'd better have 30 projects break ground. Okay? You don't want the newspaper to say, rain tax, what won't they think of next? You want the newspaper to say, city finally solving long-standing flooding and water quality problems. Right? That's what you want to have happen. It's all about abnormal psychology. That's the only coursework you ever need to take in this business. Okay. Flexible, no two are the same. I've set up, well, I've consulted over 100 cities about this. We've probably set up 40 stormwater user fees. So not all go to a user fee, for sure. Not all right then. No two are the same. You can set it up just as local government. You can set it up as an umbrella that has local government partners, and you split the fee between the two of you. We've set up separate authorities. So it can fit any kind of a situation. And the stormwater rate structure, with its combination of a user fee and all these secondary funding methods, and even taxes, you mix everything together, no two are ever the same. So it's eminently flexible. This is how you, and Steve talked about this is how you set it up. What is the meter for stormwater? Well, impervious area is the meter for stormwater. The more you pave, the more you pay. Everybody understands that. I've been in the most seemingly backwater. I was about to use the word Trumpian, but I'm being videoed. I've been in crazy places in the US, and when you say the more you pay, they go, well, yeah, I mean, why? Yeah, that sounds good to me. Let's do it that way. You know, and so people are there. So let's say one equivalent residential unit, we tend to bill in terms of how many equivalent residences is your property, because people get it. You can do per 1,000, per 100 meters, but people don't, what's 100 meters? How big is this room? But if you say a typical house is 200 square meters of paved area, if you're 40 times that, you'll pay 40 times whatever they pay per month. But we also set up a very generous crediting mechanism, which now you have a stimulus for people to maintain and build stormwater infrastructure on private property, because the credit will more than cover their maintenance cost. But if they don't maintain it and you inspect it, credit goes away instantly. Takes them a while to get it back. So now people start to hire maintenance companies. Maintenance companies have sprung up on the heels of utilities, certified maintenance companies. The whole state of Delaware developed a certification program for maintenance, and everything's maintained. Rate structures, we set up a rate structure to reflect phosphorus loading of golf courses. Whatever is driving your cost, you can put into the rate structure. Whatever is driving your cost, you can put into the rate structure, okay? So at some point, this will be kind of your new stormwater life. Stormwater is going to grow up. You're going to jump on the skateboard and you're going to walk through this, because if you don't, we'll be back here again in 2 years or 3 years going, okay, what we're doing is not working. So we have to break out of that cycle, right? The hydroillogical cycle. Okay, so pretend I'm interested. How do we set one of these up? And then I'll be done in like 2 minutes. 3 minutes. We never, ever, ever go to a council and say, we would like your permission to charge a fee. We always say, we would like your permission to begin a process of exploring if that's the right idea, right? It's because if you say we're going to set up, now they know that at some point you might come back and say we'd like to have a fee, but you're not going to come back until you have public participation fingerprints on the murder weapon, okay? You're not going to come back until you've gone through a due diligence process of public involvement, of rate studies, of whatever, and that was what Steve said was some of the cost of it. So the bad news is it may cost something. If you have to set up an impervious area database, that may cost something. What we often do is get far enough where an enterprise entity is set up within local government. They take an interfund loan to pay for the rest of it. But the cost is 1 to 2 months revenue from the utility. I mean, it's a good investment. If the odds look good, it's going to go, it'll cost you 1 to 2 months revenue from the utility, set the thing up, and from then on, you're way ahead of the game. So we use a logic process. This is called the Harvard Change Model to make it sound a lot smarter than what it is. So D is how desperate can you make the situation look and feel? Okay, let me put that in better language. Okay, I'm talking to you in the camera. How real are your issues? And can you make them factual and emotional, right? Because we want to appeal to left and right brain people. We had a video in South Denver of Jill Ledesma. I still remember her name. She's a rock star in stormwater circles. But she had a video of water knocking down her privacy fence, sweeping her lawn furniture away, with children screaming in the background. I mean, I thought, if we could get you in every community, you know, can we just borrow your video? Because as soon as we showed that, the council said, the mayor said, this should never happen in our community. End of discussion, right? Because when you just read about flooding, it flooded, but when you're there and you see it and you see people who don't have the wherewithal to protect themselves nor recover, it starts to get pretty emotional. It starts to get strong. So D, how desperate are they? V, how great is the vision of the future? If we do this, it will look like this. It will have these benefits. We will fix these problems. Blum, blum, blum. We'll give this money back. And then P is how great of a plan do we have to get from D to V? Is it going to cause me to lose an election, right? And so I would say, look, the plan will have, I think in Australia you have those runaway truck ramps when a truck is coming out of the, okay, so we have runaway truck ramps in our setup process that says, look, if everything starts to go south and there's some bad press and blah, 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 you have the ability here, here, and here, just pull the plug. Say, you know what, it's not going to work. And we've tried. And you'll still have a great business plan for stormwater that you can put on the shelf and do the cycle again. Problems are real, growing, and unresolved. So you stand before city council or anybody else, we have real, growing, and unresolved stormwater problems, and right brain, left brain. We can fix them, and we have a good plan. So that's part of that business plan. This is our plan to resolve those problems. Government must lead. Local government must lead. No one else is close enough to the problem but far enough from individual problems to resolve it. Nobody else can do it. Local government must lead. Benefits will result. It will be worth it. This is what you'll get if you set this up. There'll be benefits. It is going to cost more than we're spending now. There's no question. We're not mincing it. We are underfunding our program desperately. Among the viable options, and we will set up a complete structure, the cornerstone is going to be a user fee system like water and wastewater, for all the arguments I gave you earlier about stormwater is the third leg. We'll be back next year or in 2 years if we don't do something. I mean, this isn't going to go away, and we're not going to go away. It'll just be 2 years later and 17 more people flood it. So I got to number 7 at a city council in South Carolina where they're mostly genteel people. And the mayor is sitting there and he goes, "Damn it." And he's just right in front of the cameras and everything. And I was like, "Sir?" And he goes, "You've convinced me we need to do this, but I don't want to." I've said, yes. Yeah, we have done it. We have solved the problem, you know. And so often we'll appoint a citizens group to help us. So first, then, you have to know why you're doing this. Your drivers have to be compelling. So spend a long time making sure that you understand why you're doing this, and it's not just because we're out of money. Everybody who pays the fee thinks they're out of money, okay? There has to be compelling, sometimes showcase projects, sometimes bad flooding issues, whatever. It's got to be compelling. Then it's either a 2 or a 3-step process with or without a Stormwater Action Committee or SWIL or SWOOZY or whatever you want to, citizen group, okay? So DIMS sounds very scientific. It stands for Does It Make Sense, okay? It is a one-day roundtable discussion. We're going to do a little fake one today for Charles Strutt. But it is that. So we're going to actually do a real pay-to-play DIMS in Gold Coast and Redlands next week. They're like, we're going to go. We're going to be the first ones in Australia. Let's go. They're vying now to, I like that. They're vying to see who's going to be first. But it's just a simple, who am I? Can I make a compelling case? How would I describe my program in a way that makes sense to us? What will it cost? How much revenue can I generate? What will blow us out of the water? What will people say? And then we look at each other and go, should we go to the next step or not? I mean, that's, and it's one day, it's, you know, a couple $1,000, it's pretty whatever. A feasibility study often takes a citizens group then through a longer process. And the feasibility really, so you get council to appoint a group of citizens and they ask and answer these questions. What are we spending now? What are our problems? How have other people solved those problems? How should we solve these problems? And what will it cost? And they come back to council and they say, thank you, you know, almighty ones, this is our report. And we have already done all of our homework so that council, we know if council is going to vote yes or not to go forward. And if we think they're going to vote yes, then the whole meeting is in a sense choreographed. The mayor of Charlotte stood up and said, I have flood studies, I have this group, citizen group report, I have new regulatory requirements. What else can I do but to ask you to approve this utility, right? So we make it easy for everybody to say yes if we believe in it, right? And then that's the don't try this at home. So when we set one of these up, that looks complicated. Some of those are really easy, but we follow 4 or 5 tracks of activity. So governance is it can be really complicated if you're setting up a whole new authority. We set up Cleveland and 61 cities and 5 counties under one authority, boy oh boy. Public track is what it looks like. How do we involve the public, especially right at the end? And then after the implementation, you want the customer service to be flawless because people will call, right? Program is what you see, funding supports program, data track. So this is a new way of billing, so we're billing on the basis of impervious area, and that can cause some problems. And so we have to sort through that. It's been done 2,300 times as far as I know now in the US. That is how the stormwater utilities, remember each of them have secondary funding methods and credits and offsite programs and so on, right? Washington DC does, Philly does, so on. But that's where it went. You had a few people. I did the first one in 5 different states, and I'd come back 5 years later and there'd be 12 or 15 of them, because the guy who did the first one went and spoke at 3 conferences, and everybody else said, I want one of those. You know, just, I need a skateboard like Bobby's. You know, I need a, right, I want one of those. And they just exploded in every state after that. So I'm going to be around. So those are my puzzle pieces that I'm pushing in the middle. I lost my phone coming over here, so I got to have an Australian phone. And I don't remember it, because who can remember that many numbers? You have to be as smart as an Australian to do that. Wood Group has got, how many dots on the map do we have?
I think a lot.
We have a lot of dots on the map. So we're an Australian company. We've probably got, I don't know, 150 people in Melbourne, 100 and something in Brisbane, dots everywhere. I don't even know, because we just got bought by Wood. So I've met some of them. And so there's people around. There are at least 3 people in the US. One, he emailed me yesterday and said, my wife is packing the attic. We're coming to Australia to set these things up. So some of our best people who've set up tons of these are like, I'll come for 6 months, I'll come for a year, whatever. The guy who taught me how to do it spent 6 months in the northern island of New Zealand, and he said, I'll come over and do it. So I think there's lots of skilled help. After 3 or 4 or 5 get set up, you'll all be doing it. You know, you'll be doing it yourselves, and we'll work through the kinks. So I'm going to be retired by then. I'll be here just goofing off. Yeah, I think that's it. Thank you. Appreciate it.